Welcome, everybody. Okay, we're going to start. I lost my little bell. Welcome to our program on preventing gun violence. And the evening is, this is Fidalgo Democrats, and the evening is co-sponsored by Safe and Sane Skagit. Is this microphone on? It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it is.
And we have speakers coming who are here from Seattle, from Alliance for Gun Responsibility. That was not good. But first, we have a young man who has come all the way from Seattle. They also came from Seattle, but he has to leave in 10 minutes and go back to SeaTac and pick up his mother at the airport. So, therefore, of course, we're going to have him first. And he is Ilani Nurick, and he's the Regional Organizing Director for the Elizabeth Warren campaign. So he's going to say a few words. He wants to meet you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for welcoming me to your meeting. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am Ilani Nurick. I'm Elizabeth Warren's Regional Organizing Director in the Northwest region of the state. So I'm pretty much going to be everything north of Seattle, starting with Bothell, all the way up to the border. And really, oh, and here's Megan. So a lot of you probably know Megan already. She's really our boots on the ground organizer in Anacortes. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to build a campaign up here that's going to be big enough to win in November, regardless of who the nominee is. We want to be big, we want to be bad, and we want to be knocking on so many doors that everyone's going to know that, we're going to turn this place blue at some point. So really the goal of what we're going to be working on is going to be trying to find folks who aren't as engaged and bring them in, whether that's coming to a debate watch party, whether that's writing some postcards to folks, whether it's texting a friend, whatever it is. We want to be a presence on the ground that's going to be organizing all the way through our primary and then all the way through the general election. That's going to be helping folks really show that we have a presence here and show that we're really strong and are going to fight to the finish line. So I really am just here to introduce myself and say I'm going to be Warren's staff person on the ground. But I really also want to let Megan just chat for 1 minute because she's been doing so much good work up here. And just give a little plug that I really think everyone should be, involved doing stuff. This right here is exactly what we need folks to come in our communities to actually be here and organizing and showing up. Because that's what didn't happen in 2016 and what we were able to do in 2018. And that's what we need to do again in 2020. That's what's going to win. So I really encourage folks to just put your name out there and just come out to a debate watch party, come out to one of Megan's book clubs where she goes over some of the policy nitty-gritties, come out to a Pints and Policy where we'll have a couple of brews and talk about some plans, or just maybe we'll do a trivia night, something like that. We're going to make it fun, we want to make it easy, and we wanted to make a space where everyone can come and be part of this team, and then part of the grander blue team that's going to sweep out the man in the White House and sweep in someone new. Megan, do you want to just talk for 1 minute about kind of what you're doing?
Hi guys, I'm Megan Glancy. I am working with Teresa Baker to kind of community organize here as a volunteer with Ilani as our staffer. And he's just joined us recently and we're super excited to have him. Really fun opportunities. Okay, Washington primary is March 10th. It is less than 100 days away, and you might be thinking, I don't know who I'm going to vote for yet. The field is still wide open. That's okay, because we're still if you're still in that phase, we're still in the phase of educating you and walking alongside you as you make that decision. One of the biggest things that we've got going on here is my book club. Tomorrow night is one in my home from 6 to 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. And this week we're actually going over Elizabeth Warren's plan to expand Social Security, which might be something you're interested in. So I like to go through the plans in detail with you so you know exactly what it is she stands for. And then we even go through the homework she's done on these plans. So we talk about the resources and the articles and the links that she's provided so that you know precisely how she's gotten to the result that she's come to. So the book clubs are really awesome to get that information and to kind of join in positive discourse with other voters in town. We got a good group. Some are undecided. So you might not be sure yet, but this might be a space for you to come and get those answers. And I'm really fired up, and I really want you to come. But other than that, if you might have a better inkling of where you want to go, we're canvassing. We're knocking doors, and we're doing it this Saturday. We do it every Saturday. We meet up at Pelican Bay Books, usually around 10 a.m. And we can do some on-site training, or I can come and meet with you one-on-one and help you train how we do that. We've got really cool mobilization tools that make it very simple and user-friendly. So we are ready for the primary. The primary is right around the corner. We're off of one holiday. We only have one more, and it's 2020. So if you guys aren't sure about book club, aren't sure about canvassing, Alani already mentioned it, so many different opportunities to get involved. You can text for Warren, you can call for Warren. I'm also a call crew representative nationally, so let me know about that. So many different opportunities, but volunteership is so huge, and it's what those individual conversations that you have with every single voter is what makes a difference. And those independents that you're not sure of and those neighbors that you're not sure of, you would be surprised at the kinds of conversations you can have with these people and the kinds of conversations I've had with these people, our fellow Anacordans. So I am going to pass around a sign-up sheet. If you are interested in any of these things, especially book club and tomorrow, please can put down your name and your information. Yeah, Julia, what's up? You're reading tag.
Did you say you're just for Anacordans or?
So kind of Fidalgo at large, I mean, we will take anyone. Come join us either way. Yeah, there's.
Is there an organizer for Skagit County?
Megan, can I jump in here?
Go.
I'm going to be the organizer for Skagit County. So I'll be coming up here pretty regularly, and we're looking for folks in as many places we can get, Mount Vernon, Monroe, wherever it is. We have a couple of organizers on the ground already, but we're definitely looking to expand and bring folks in, and we're going to be doing a ton of debate watch parties because I think they're awesome and fun. We'll try to make some bingo cards for those, just to initially bring folks in. So even if you just want to watch the debate with some friends, we're going to be doing that hopefully in quite a few places around Skagit, as well as places up around my region at least, and presumably the state. But we definitely do have a bit of on the ground boots already throughout Skagit, but we're definitely going to be ramping it up. As now that I'm boots on the ground as well, started a couple weeks ago, so we're going to be definitely bringing that level up. And I have to go pick up my mom from the airport.
Get out.
So I have to leave. But thank you so much for having me here, and I hope to be back next month. Okay, thank you so much.
I just wanted to say too. I think I speak for Teresa too, and probably Alani, that when we come to these...
Please use the mic.
Oh, yes, definitely. I was going to say, just to close out, I probably speak for Teresa and Alani, but when we come to these meetings, we definitely have the intention of coming alongside the organizations that are planning to speak. So absolutely in support of the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, and as well as the Noise Alliance that was there last time, and any of the other speakers that can organize this for us. We want to champion your initiatives too, and we're excited about maybe working alongside one another. But I will pass this around, and I would love to get some interest. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Grace.
Since there are some folks here from Whatcom too, I'll mention that Ilani's territory is from Everett north to the border, so including Whatcom County too, not just Skagit County, because he's the regional organizer. Okay, so Rita.
But we're still on presidential candidate 30 seconds.
Oh, sure.
I do.
Pull it down closer to you.
As you can see, I'm supporting.
Take the mic out so. Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm supporting Pete Buttigieg for president. We don't have an organized group as yet, but anyway, there's a number of people out here who are supporters. He's going to be in Seattle on December 14th. There's a flyer here with details, and if you're interested, I'll put it in the back.
You might wonder why we've been featuring only the Warren campaign. It's because that's the only campaign that's asked to come and speak. So other campaigns are also welcome. I was just taken by surprise because I didn't know you were going to, but it's a good thing. So if you hear other campaigns wanting to make announcements here, just have them get in touch with me, or you can. All right, so now we're going to go on to probably most of you have heard that our Representative Jeff Morris is going to step down January 6th. And so there's a replacement process that's going to happen to replace him, to fill out his term. And so the precinct committee officers are going to meet. This is the process. They'll meet. That meeting is being set up now. And they will choose 3 potential candidates to fill out Jeff's term, and then submit those names to the commissioners of the 3 counties in the 40th district, to the Skagit County commissioners and the counselors for San Juan County and Whatcom County. And then those commissioners will select one. So that's, in a nutshell, what the procedure will be. So candidates are arising by the minute today. And we have 3 of them here, and then I have a statement to read after those 3 have spoken. So I'm giving each one up to 5 minutes if they like. So if you would take turns coming up to the podium, or you can speak over there if you like that better. But do use the mic and speak into the top of it. And Amanda, you can go first.
I get to go first. Yay.
I'll use this one.
Okay.
As long as it works. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hi, my name is Amanda Hubick. I am actually currently still working for Jeff. I'm his legislative assistant. I have been with him down in Olympia this entire year, and it has been amazing. If y'all do have questions about why Jeff is leaving, catch up with me afterwards. Happy to talk to you. But he's found a job with a company called Schneider Electric outside of France. He is going to be the North American contact for a ton of policy stuff. So the 23 years that he has put into the legislature and into all of his personal, kind of life energies, he's moving on. He's moving up. He's super excited, and I'm personally super excited for him. So if you see him, let him know that you're gonna miss him, because I'm gonna miss him too. But I think I would make a great successor for him. I think I'd make a great successor for you, for our district. Like I said, I have loved being down in Olympia for this last year. I've loved going back, learning about what's important to you. A little bit of background on me. Grew up in Texas, moved up here in 2005, so I'm almost a local. I have another 10 years to go or so. I have a degree in psychology from Texas A&M University, which is also great for politics. I have had kind of a varied experience when I've been up here in Anacortes. I spent 10 years down at Seabear Company on the corner of 30th and T, doing e-commerce, doing web marketing for about 8.5 years, and then I spent a year and a half doing inventory and supply chain management. So I've seen what it's like to work in small private business. And then after that, I got a job at the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce. So I got to do the second best job I've ever had. I got paid to talk about this island. I got paid to bring people here and walk them around town and take them on hikes and go kayaking. And it was absolutely amazing. With that job, I got more free time, so I started getting involved in politics and in volunteering. Rita hooked me up with a young man who was running for port commissioner, and I managed his campaign successfully, so that was super exciting and amazing, and that was my first official taste of politics. I've always been a very opinionated voter, but I never really had a chance to get involved. So from there, I went through Leadership Skagit. I'm serving on the alumni committee, and I'm actually working on a group of people that are putting together what's called a challenge day. And coincidentally, it is the Communicating as a Leader Challenge Day. So you're learning how to ask for money, how to have difficult conversations, how to work within people to reach a common goal. So that's super exciting. We actually just had a meeting right before this. I've done volunteer work with the Skagit Land Trust, with the Anacortes Arts Festival here in town. I sit on a board called SWAN, the Skagit Women's Alliance and Network, and we just had our Women of the Year award. So I have been involved in that for 3 years now, and then depending on what happens in January, I may or may not roll off. I have a resume back of the back. It's the one that is Aggie Maroon, so you can't really miss it. And I'm super excited. I would love to go back. Like I said, I think that I have the expertise and the knowledge to not miss a beat. Like I said, there's no way that I will ever absorb Jeff's 23 years of knowledge, but I've listened and really, really heard what's been important to the community over the last year. And I know there's a lot of stuff that we haven't finished down in Olympia. We still need to work on clean fuels. We still need to work on affordable housing. We still need to work on zero emission vehicles. We still need to finish a whole lot of stuff that we started. And I want to go back and get it done. So, but yeah, I'm happy to talk to you after this, and my resume has my contact information on it, and I look forward, hopefully, to earning your vote and serving you in Olympia. Thank you.
And next we have Michael Lilliquist from Bellingham. He's on the city council up there.
Hi, so I'm a member and active in the 40th LD Dems, but I've never been to Fidalgo Dems, and so I thought I would come here and introduce yourself.
Walk into the top, please.
Sure, so I thought I'd come and introduce myself and get to know you here at the Fidalgo Ds as well. So I'm my third term in the Bellingham City Council. I've been, working in local government, working on progressive issues for several terms. I know what it's like to be a politician, and I know what it's like to not be a polarizing politician, but always stand for your values. To be very clear with people that you disagree with in an honest way, but also stand up and champion the values you believe in. Right now on the City Council, our top issues are climate action and dealing with fossil fuel emissions, reducing plastic pollution from single-use plastics. We're working on housing equity, housing affordability, and particularly addressing homelessness in our community. And what I found in each of these issues is there is a state-level component that is either helping or hurting local governments and local communities and the people that we serve from dealing with each and every one of these issues. And so one of the assets that I would bring to Olympia is understanding exactly what happens in communities when organizations, nonprofits, and local governments try to work on these important issues, and exactly how the state government can help us or not help us. So I think all the issues or the main issues that matter to me and my constituency matter to all the constituencies and the people in Washington State. So it's not a change in job. Well, it's a big change in how the job is done, at least. Council. I'm also currently president of the Walking Transportation Authority. That's our bus service leadership position there. I've also represented both the city and the Transit Authority on our Whatcom Council of Governments. I work on economic development through numerous organizations. Currently on the board of the Downtown Bellingham Partnership, which is basically a nonprofit supported both by businesses and by the city to promote economic development. Positions include working with our local tourism board. I've also, not officially as part of the city, but one of the things that's really important to me is a leadership position in DVSAS, that's the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services of Whatcom County. Working on that, I've also worked for several years volunteering for Law Advocates, which is a free civil legal aid organization for providing legal assistance to low and no income people. And that's outside of City Council. I actually kind of do that on the down low, frankly, because I don't want it to be politicized. But I thought you should know about it to learn a little bit more about me. I'm not particularly prepared for this because, as you know, this position just came open. But a little more about me. I have a PhD in behavioral neuroscience, so I was trained as a research scientist, but I left that job for an even better job. I was a stay-at-home dad for a dozen years and raised my daughter, Rebecca. best job ever. I worked myself out of that job, however. She is now currently a senior at University of Washington, getting a degree in civil engineering. She might actually have a job. She's actually got a paid internship right now, so she's paying her own way. I think what I'd rather do with the rest of my 5 minutes is to open it up to Q&A if there isn't any. Frankly, you've seen my face, you've seen who I am. Those of you who are PCOs, you're going to have a difficult decision to make, and then the various councils will need to have another difficult decision. But if it's not already clear, I hope to make it clear to you, I'm a person of clarity, understanding, and integrity. And I think that's the biggest thing. I was talking with a group today, an indivisible group called the Undaunted, about climate change and testifying. And I said, look, say what are your qualifications to come here and speak and testify on this issue? And I said, my qualifications is my mom's name is Diane, and my dad's name is Bill, and my daughter's name is Rebecca, and my partner's name is Andy, and those are my qualifications. It's being a human being that when you come and when you testify before an elected body, it's being a human being that's most influential and persuasive. And I remember that as the person on the other side, the person who's elected, who's being represented. And if by some miracle I'm appointed to go down to Olympia, I will continue to be that same person. So, thank you very much for your time, and any questions?
The questions will be after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Marco next.
Lastly, we have Marco Morales. And then I'm going to read the statement from one who cannot be here.
Okay, so how's everybody doing? My name is Marco Morales.
Hold the mic up.
Thank you.
Speaking to the top of it, not the side of it, the top of it.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Mic check, 1, 2. Okay, cool. All right, so my name is Marco Morales. I grew up in Mount Vernon. I actually drove here after work today. I work for the Mount Vernon School District, the district's migrant graduation specialist. And so what is that? What is that role? So my role at the district is working with migrant students, and migrant students are the children of people that have either two occupations. They work in the fisheries or they work in agriculture, and their parents migrate for work purposes. So I am the district's migrant graduation specialist. I've been doing that job for about a month, so I'm very new. Prior to that, I was actually working here out of ESD here in Anacortes, but I was based in Stanwood. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and sort of why I decided to seek this appointment. I grew up in Mount Vernon. I graduated from Mount Vernon High School in 2007. And after graduation, I got a job. College wasn't something that was on my mind. I wasn't the greatest student as a high school student. I wanted to go to school and play basketball and go hang out with my friends. Those were my priorities as a young man, being 15, 16, 17 years old. When I was about almost 23, actually a couple weeks before my 23rd birthday, I decided that I wanted to go to college. And I reached out to a recruiter at Eastern Washington University, and her first question to me was, well, what was your GPA in high school? And I said, my GPA in high school was a 1.9 GPA. And she said to me, well, you're not college material. You're not college material. And she asked me if I had a job. And I said, I do have a job. And she said, keep that job, because right now we're in the middle of a recession, and at least you have a job. A lot of folks out there don't have a job. You have a job, keep that job. My response to that woman was, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm going to go to a different college, a much better college, and one day I'm going to give you a call to let you know that I went on to go to college. So I went to Western Washington University, knocked on a professor's door during his office hours. I showed up and I said, my name is Marco Morales, we've met at some point, and I want to go to school. How do I do it? I didn't know how to fill out a financial aid form. I didn't know how to apply for college. I didn't know how to do anything, but I knew that I wanted to be a college student. I reached out to that professor. He said, you know what? Go to Wacom, get your grades, and we'll get you into Western. I went to Wacom. I went there for a year. My first quarter, I think I almost got a 4.0, if not a 4.0. My second semester, I got a 4.0. My third semester, got a 4.0. at the time we had a place called the Multicultural Center that was maybe 1/10 of the size of this room, where people of diverse backgrounds went to hang out. There was a desk and there was 2 chairs, and I said, we got to change this, because if we value diversity at this school, we need a bigger space for people to be able to reach across and get to know each other, because I think a lot of times that's what happens as community members. We don't have the guts to approach other people and see how much similar we are when we think we're very different. After I ran for vice president, I became the vice president, knowing that the president sets the agenda, but as a vice president, I could move my agenda. And I became the vice president, and I got us a great space with a beautiful view of Mount Baker. And then I went to Western. I transferred to Western. I think they have a great education system. I think they have a great healthcare system. Even if you're poor in Cuba, you're gonna be taken care of. If you're poor, you can still get a PhD. So those are things that they have. One of the things I think they could improve on was that they're very dependent for their food security on China, as an example. And I think we as Americans and we as people need to make sure that as climate change continues to make it almost impossible for us to grow our food, that we have ways to grow our food in ways that are accessible to other folks. I went to after graduation from Western. I got into the University of Heidelberg in Germany, and I moved to Germany. I got on a plane, flew to Frankfurt, and moved and got a master's degree from Heidelberg University. So I have an MA from Heidelberg University. Some of you might know where Heidelberg is at. And so I lived in Heidelberg. I got married a couple weeks before I moved to Heidelberg, and my wife went to join me in Heidelberg. So we spent some time in Heidelberg. I initially, and then after doing my master's, I came back to Mount Vernon because I wanted to be of service to the community that raised me. And so I am here today. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll be here for the rest of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marco. Okay, and then Alex Rammel is also running. He could not be here tonight because he is speaking to Whatcom County Council tonight about proposed regulations that they're proposing up there. He says, Fidalgo Democrats, I'm sorry I'm not able to make it today. The Whatcom County Council is voting tonight on fossil fuel regulations, and I need to be there to voice my support. I'm disappointed to miss the critically important topic you're focused on tonight. When I ran to be state representative in 2018, I was recognized as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. I hope we can all continue to follow the moral leadership and clarity brought by younger citizens on this issue. As you may have heard, I intend to seek the appointment to replace Jeff Morris as representative from the 40th District. I put my name forward because we need a leader who knows our critical issues inside and out. We need a leader with a history of standing up for our values. And we need a leader who listens, collaborates, and who will work with everyone. For me, some of our state's most urgent priorities are confronting climate change and ensuring that everyone in the community can afford a place to call home. I have spent the last 15 years working to protect our climate and to ensure that there are enough homes people can afford in the community. I helped build affordable housing projects, worked to reduce energy costs and pollution from thousands of homes and small businesses. And I've stood up to corporations when they threaten to pollute the community. Our next state representative will need to carry policy priorities in Olympia, but they will also be a voice for our values in the community. I've worked alongside many of you to elect other progressive leaders. You can count on me to help other Democrats up and down the ticket. Most recently, I've been a volunteer member of the campaign committee of the Whatcom County Democrats, where I helped elect Satpal Sidhu to Whatcom County Executive and Carol Frazee to Whatcom County Council. I've helped lead the team that opened a campaign office, hired staff, raised thousands of dollars, organized voter contacts, and I raised the alarm when Big Oil tried to buy the election. You can count on me to continue to support progressive leadership at all levels. I am known as someone who builds coalitions. When I ran for office in 2018, I was supported by diverse interests that have not always worked together. For example, the union representing many refinery workers and Washington conservation voters both backed me in 2018 because I've worked with both to find collaborative solutions that work for both labor and the environment. That year, I knocked on over 4,000 doors to ask voters here what matters in their lives. I'm committed to listening and understanding the issues from a diversity of perspective. I'm a single dad, I'm a community organizer, and I'm an unflinching Democrat. That's the spirit and the temperament I will bring to being your state representative. If you share these values, I hope to earn your support. I'd welcome a chance to answer your questions. Please reach out to talk anytime. And thanks to Corrine for the chance to send this message. And he gives his phone number, 360-305-5079. Okay. All right, that's
His name again.
Alex Ramel, R-A-M-E-L. Okay, from Bellingham. All right. We have time for one or two questions, so not very long, then we need to go to our main program. Kathleen, do you want to come up or? No. Did you call that? Bring you the mic. Wim will bring you the mic.
I think they're gonna bring him up.
I just want to know if you called the woman at Easter.
I have not called her yet, man.
Oh.
I will at some point. You're not calling her.
Is there any other question, or shall we go on? Oh, Joe Verdos.
I'm just curious about the impact of the car tax being withdrawn and what the individuals have on it as far as the funding the infrastructure that needs to be developed.
Did everyone hear that? I couldn't hear him.
The question had to do with the impact of the car tax initiative that was just passed that revoked a bunch of funding mechanisms that local jurisdictions relied on. So for example, the Washington Transportation Authority got $1 million a year for paratransit. This is specialized door-to-door service for people who are handicapped, slashed. And so we're going to be taking that out of reserves, and we can continue to do that, the Transit Authority, for a year or 2 or 3, but we're really hoping that there's a fix, structural fix. For regard to Bellingham and Whatcom County, we have 2 major projects have to do with I-5 that were funded. I think around $8 or $9 million for a road project underneath I-5. I-5 basically cuts Bellingham in half. I-5 cuts a lot of communities in Bellingham. And the way to restore that so that everyone can get through. I mean, like if you're a bicyclist or a walker and you're on one side of the highway, that's where you're going to stay. So we're putting a multimodal connector underneath the highway where it's high enough. Well, that funding is now half gone. And we're trying to figure out what we can do. The state has a lot of this money, but Governor Inslee said, wait a minute, we're going to hold back all the money we haven't already committed. We're going to sit on our money because there may be other projects, higher projects, that we're going to need to save that money for. So yeah, that project I talked about rated highly under the current regime or the past regime, but under the new regime, maybe there's some other project that's more important. The other one has to do with the interchange, exit 254 or something in Bellingham, where to get on the highway going northbound, you don't go northbound, you cross the bridge and then you cross the highway again to get on northbound, and that doubles up traffic on the overpass. A common sense project, very expensive. My guess is, I think there's a list in the state of about 36 different major projects like that, all which the governor's put a hold on until we can figure this out. There's a legal challenge for it. IMA's initiative may get overturned, but there's a combination of backfilling, like we're doing in WTA, and forestalling, and then legal efforts, and there may be a legislative fix as well. I know that coming up in the short term, you know better than I do, the idea was there wasn't going to be a major funding transportation package in 2020. The legislature was going to put that off for the big session. This may still stay that way, who knows, but there's going to be some new thinking on transportation, and that whatever that big funding package is in 2021 will be in the new context, whatever that is. So I don't know if Amanda or Marco want to add to that.
Yeah.
Amanda.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So the way that the state budgets work is that the big budget is set in the first half of the biennium, since the state runs on a 2-year budget. And And you're again totally right. There's a lot of things that are being held back, but I think one of the things that we also have to address is, one, how did this actually pass? And two, why did it pass with so few people actually really turning out to vote? When you look at the number of people that showed up, they showed up because they're mad about a whole lot of stuff. And it's tough too, because a lot of this money from transportation goes to funding things like ferries that serve our district so much. But there's also, the car tabs. You get a fee for this, you get a fee for this. Now there's a hybrid fee, and people feel like they're being punished for making the right decisions. So I think that what we're going to have to do is sit down and have those really hard conversations. There's been a pilot study being done on a road usage charge that's been going on since 2012. And so the Washington Transportation Commission is getting ready to present on that. So we'll kind of move forward from what my understanding is and see what happens with that. But there's a lot that's got to change, because this is a good reminder that when people aren't happy, that they do things that kind of, I don't think a whole lot of people understood the ramifications of this, because that $75 hybrid fee is still going to be on your car tab when you go to renew. That $225 EV fee is still there. And a lot of the people that called said that they were voting for the Enactment Initiative to make that go away, and it didn't. So we need to work on better transparency on initiatives, and we need to work on making sure that we're actually serving our constituents.
Thank you. All right. Oh, he wants to say something.
No, it's fine. No, it's okay.
You didn't have a very
Sure.
substantive
I'll just have like a quick answer, if I may. Yeah, I think I echo both of them. I do think a lot of times voters become angry, and I think this was one of those instances. And I think that's why information is important. I think sometimes we act out of anger without knowing information, and so I think we as people that don't want to be in government, that are in government, it is responsibility to make sure that everybody knows what they're voting on. And so I want to make that a priority for everything that we put on a ballot. So that's all I want to say about that. Thank you.
All right.
A lot of people knew that they were voting for.
Thanks so much to the candidates for coming tonight and speaking to us. You're welcome to stay for the whole meeting if you have time.
Thank you.
And if you don't have time, you don't have to stay. Okay, now I apologize to the main speakers for making you wait. You've been so patient, but we have this important issue here. So I'll introduce the three speakers, and if you'll come up to the table so people can see who you are. They're going to give a presentation. Logan Reismuth lives in Seattle. This is Logan.
Hi, everyone.
Lives in Seattle, has a BA in political science. He's working on a Master of Public Administration from Seattle University. He moved back to Seattle in 2018 and joined the Initiative 1639 campaign. He joined Alliance for Gun Responsibility full-time in last December and is now the chapter team advocacy coordinator for the Alliance. That's Logan. And then the next one is, and Margie, if you would come up too, where are you? Please. Dylan Connor also lives in Seattle and has a BA in International Relations from University of Washington. He worked abroad helping nonviolent movements undermine dictatorships, and he used to teach music. He started at the Alliance as an intern and was the field director for the Initiative 1639 campaign. Now he's the policy and coalition coordinator for the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. And thirdly is Margie Lavelle, who lives here in Edison. She's an artist and owns an art gallery in Edison called IE. She was the founder of Safe and Sane Gadgets. She and a few other people, she likes to say. And now she's Safe and Sane Gadgets secretary and treasurer. And she'll describe local activities of Safe and Sane. Okay, they're going to give you a presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. As I just said, my name is Logan. Throughout the presentation, if I'm difficult to hear, just put a thumbs up in the air and I'll make sure to get closer to the mic. But I'm going to do a presentation on just who the Alliance is, our history, the work that we've done, and what we're planning to do in 2020. And then Dylan will go more into our 2020 policy agenda that just came out a few weeks ago. But to start, Dylan and I work for the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. We are a small nonprofit down in Seattle. Our office is currently in Pioneer Square, going to be moving up into First Hill to be closer to the hospitals come the new year. But we've been around, well, let me start off. This is our mission statement, kind of long. It's essentially we want to balance rights and responsibilities. It's a political move to be able to have the most credibility when talking about such a highly polarized topic. By saying that we balance rights and responsibilities, well, that's how we focus our legislation and our policies to make sure that we are not increasing the polarization within this issue. The Alliance was founded in 2013 by a group of local activists who wanted to put forth a bill in the legislature to increase background checks. That eventually turned into an initiative that I will talk more about in a little bit. But the Alliance is fairly new. We've only been around for about 7 years. And so we are still developing, but we are seen as one of the most, if not the most, powerful organization in terms of reducing gun violence in our state here. The Alliance is pretty special because we have multiple aspects of the organization. We have a C4 side, 501c4, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, which allows us to do all the legislative advocacy, policy development, as well as accountability, making sure that our policies that we pass are actually implemented and implemented well. The next is the 501c3, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility Foundation. This is where we do all the public education, research, implementation, and community engagement, exactly what we're doing right now. That allows us to go out and make sure that we're connecting with the communities, develop our chapter team program, and make sure we're empowering local advocates like Safe and Sane Skagit to do the work that they want to do. And finally, we have 2 different PACs, otherwise known as political action committees. We have one for the state here, which allows us to donate funds to endorse candidates, gun violence prevention champions, as well as we just recently added in 2018 a federal PAC. We did a lot of work in 2018 in accordance with I-1639 to get Dr. Kim Schreier elected down in the 8th Congressional District, and we did a lot of work with her. So there's a whole multiple different functions of the Alliance. We are only 9 staff members, so we are pretty small. We're all stretched pretty thin and lacking sleep, but it's what we love to do. So here's some stats of gun violence in the U.S. On an average day, more than 100 people are killed in the U.S. due to gun violence, which is a number that just is continually shocking and really impacts people. More than 600,000 people have died as a result of gun violence since Columbine. A lot of people talk about Columbine as the start of the gun violence issue or epidemic that has been plaguing our country, and many people talk about Columbine as it should have been the beginning and end of it all. More than 215,000 students have survived a school shooting since Columbine, and there will be some more stats, Washington specific, in a couple slides. Mass shootings do account for only 1% of the gun violence experienced in our country, but due to mass media, that tends to be inflated a bit. It tends to encompass most of our attention when it comes to gun violence. Far more people are shot and survive than are killed after being shot. So if you think about 100 people a day die from gun violence, most estimates say that for every 1 person who dies from gun violence, 2 are shot and live. So the impacts of this issue are holistic throughout our communities, and it impacts everybody, whether you have been held at gunpoint yourself or family members, your kids or your grandkids are going through active shooter drills, or just continually having to think about gun violence in their daily lives. Here's a pie chart on the gun violence in the U.S. The vast majority of gun violence in our country is actually suicide. That's one thing that a lot of GVP, gun violence prevention organizations, work to do, is to make sure that people know that suicide completed with a firearm is gun violence. Perfect. So here are some stats of gun violence here in Washington. In Washington, a person is killed with a gun every 14 hours. Nearly 12,000 people have died as a result of gun violence in Washington since Columbine. In 2017, 849 people died as a result of gun violence. 75% of all gun deaths in Washington are suicide. That number ranges between 75 to 80% depending on the year. And in King County, young people ages 18 to 24 are most likely to die by firearm homicide, while older adults 65 plus are most likely to die by firearm suicide. And here's another pie chart breakdown of that. Suicide is one of the biggest aspects that we focus to that area when I'm talking about the initiatives. So this is a program that we ran last year specifically around our luncheon in May, but we wanted to put a face to the issue. We worked with a bunch of survivors that are in our network to speak about their loved ones that were lost. And so you can go to our website at gunresponsibility.org and find the stories about these individuals, as well as what happened to them and what their family members are currently doing to make sure it doesn't happen to other families. Gun violence is a public health crisis, and that is the way that the Alliance takes on this issue, is through a public health lens, by gathering data and using that data and research from other institutions and universities to make sure we are drafting the best policies possible. One of the biggest reasons why we decided to go through a public health lens is because if you look at tobacco or drunk driving, both of those issues were tackled through a public health lens, and they have been incredibly successful in reducing deaths and fatality rates within tobacco usage and drunk driving as well. Not only do we focus on the legislature, but we have ran 3 statewide ballot initiatives successfully. Our first one was in 2014, which was Initiative 594. It closed the background check loophole in Washington at gun shows and online sales. That was the policy that originally developed the Alliance back in 2013 that they tried to put forth in the legislature and then pulled to do a statewide ballot initiative. In 2016, we ran Initiative 1491, which instituted extreme risk protection orders, ERPOs. Those are also known as red flag laws across the country. We prefer to refer to them as ERPOs to make sure that we're not stigmatizing mental health. If we continue to talk about mental health as red flags or something to be concerned about, people aren't going to seek the help that they need. But ERPOs are an incredibly important tool to make sure that our loved ones are safe. It allows family members and law enforcement to file a protective order against somebody who is showing signs of attempting suicide or harming anybody else in their family or community, and it allows law enforcement to come in and take away the firearms until that situation can be addressed and handled. And most often, those firearms rights are suspended for about 6 months. It's an incredibly important life-saving policy that we're really trying to do a whole public education campaign around, because we passed it in 2014, but it's not really being implemented across our state very well. Most law enforcement agencies don't even really know what they are or how to file them, so that's why I'm going to spend a little bit more talking about that today. And we actually have a pamphlet on the back table. It's the skinny one that details ERPOs and gunprotectionorder.com, which I highly recommend picking up that pamphlet and reading through it, just in case you might ever need them in the future. And most recently, in 2018, we passed Initiative 1639, which was the most comprehensive gun reform policy that our state has ever seen. It raised the purchasing age of semi-automatic assault rifles from 18 to 21, instituted enhanced background checks, mandatory safe storage, and a whole host of other things. That was a policy as well that was originally introduced into the legislature, but based off of inaction, we pulled to then put onto the ballot. We do focus primarily on the legislature because it is way less expensive. And for 1639, we spent about $4.5 million on that. So we want to focus on the legislature where we can get even more policies passed at way more cost effective as well. So back in 2019, we're still in 2019. So in 2019, we actually had our most successful legislative session ever. To put this into context, before 2019, our most successful session, we had passed 4 or 5 bills. In 2019, we were able to pass 10. So we were able to get a whole host of system fixes as well as other policies that protect our law enforcement, domestic violence victims, as well as just research and education. We were able to get a whole host of money, I believe $1 million, to go to Harborview to do gun violence prevention research, because it is not being done on a national basis through the CDC because of political reasons from the past. Yes. This is our scorecard. We put out a scorecard of all of our legislators every year. We brought some, they're in the back as well. But we give all of our legislators a ranking, a graded ranking on how they voted in terms of gun violence prevention policies. We had a lot of A rankings this year, which is absolutely wonderful, more than I think we've ever had in the past. And we hope to continue to give out A rankings. It can be kind of fun to go through and see what legislators are great and others are not so good on this issue, and definitely check and see if your representatives are, how good they are on this issue as well. So implementation is a really big thing, really big aspect of the work that we do. We pass these policies, but we want to make sure that they're actually being used and implemented appropriately and correct. So what we do is we partner with the Regional Domestic Violence Firearms Enforcement Unit, otherwise known as the Unit. That's what we prefer to call them because that name is so long. But we work with the unit to make sure that IRPOs are being implemented within King County and then setting a model for the rest of the country, the rest of the state. My apologies. Let me see. It is estimated that for every 10 to 12 firearms retrieved from an IRPO, so when an IRPO is filed, 1 suicide is prevented. And in 2018, over 600 firearms, or nearly 600 firearms, were recovered. So that means that there was many, many suicides that were prevented based off of this policy. And of course, because 80% of gun violence in our state is by suicide, that is one of the primary focuses of our work. So we also do a lot of public education as well, because gun violence is not really an issue that is widely talked about. It is so polarized, people don't want to talk about it in their communities or in their families, so we try and do as much public education as possible. One website that we partnered with multiple other organizations to create is gunprotectionorder.com. It details everything about an IRPO, an extreme risk protection order, how to file them, what to do, what they're for, and even if you have one filed against you, what to do and the steps to take. My favorite aspect about this website is, let's see if the mouse showed up. No. So if you see that red rectangle right in the middle, it has an X with a safety exit. That's incredibly important. So think in the case of a domestic violence individual, a domestic violence survivor, if they are looking to protect themselves from their abuser, but they go to this website and their abuser comes and stands behind them, they can click that button, and as soon as they click it, they are brought to a random web page so that their abuser doesn't know what they're looking into to keep them safe. That was something that we always are working with survivors who are impacted by this issue to know that we are working on the issue in the best way possible. When talking with old domestic violence survivors, we asked, what do you need in this website? And they said, a way to get out of there quickly so people don't know what you're researching. Highly, highly recommend going to this website to learn more about extreme risk protection orders. We also hold summits. So for example, back in middle of November, right after the election, we held a hate and gun violence summit down in Seattle, where we partnered with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, to talk about the intersection of hate crimes and guns and how much more deadly hate crimes are when a gun is involved. We've also run summits in the past specifically on IRPOs. Maybe about 6-8 months ago, we held a summit down in Pierce County where we invited law enforcement from all over the county to come, learn about IRPOs, what they are, how to file them appropriately, as well as we had domestic violence survivors through the YWCA come out and talk and give examples of how IRPOs saved their lives. And after that summit, there were many, many law enforcement personnel who came up and were like, we didn't even know this was a thing. Thank you so much for coming out and talking with us about this. We have many, many cases that this will be life-saving for. We do a lot of community engagement as well. Our program director, Brandy Grant, runs a program called Education to Action, where she goes out into a community and educates them and gives them the resources to become advocates for themselves. So a lot of times marginalized communities don't know where to begin. And so our program director will go out and work with them to make sure that they know the legislative process, who to be talking to, and just become advocates, and then so that they don't have to wait for somebody else to do it for them. We do a lot of community partnerships with other organizations. For example, Community Passageways and Choose 180 are really great felony and misdemeanor diversion programs that make sure that youth and young adults who are initially introduced into the criminal justice system do not have that following them for the rest of their lives. And that's one of actually the most successful ways to reduce gun violence, is by talking with youth who are involved with the justice system at an early age. And then we also have an intern and fellow program. We're actually hiring new interns and fellows right now, if you know anybody in Seattle or the area. We hire 2 fellows and 2 interns per session. Fellows stay with us for 6 months, and interns stay with us for 3 months. And we try and get them a complete holistic view of the organization, not just the advocacy side. I already talked a little bit about the political action committees. We'll go over this. Won't go over this as much. So we do a lot of work with partners, not only here in the state, but throughout the country. We do get consulted. We do get called to be a consultant on firearm policies in other states pretty often. As I said, we've partnered with the Anti-Defamation League, the Children's Alliance, Community Passageways, Faith Action Network. Grandmothers Against Gun Violence is a huge partner of ours here in the state. March for Our Lives, Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Sense, Washington Education Association. We really pride ourselves on the work that our coalition does. It is not just us wanting to spearhead this issue. We know that it's going to start with a coalition. We're going to fix gun violence, this epidemic, by working all together to make sure that we combat this issue. So we actually we have started to do a lot more work on the national scene as well. Recently, in this past year, there was a Senate hearing on IRPOs, red flag laws. And we actually, here in Washington State, have a prosecutor, Kim Wyatt, who is the only prosecutor in the country whose sole focus is domestic violence. So she knows the IRPO process in and out. And she was asked to come testify before the Senate Law and Justice Committee that, surprisingly, Lindsey Graham called and is in support of, to give her testimony on why IRPOs and red flag laws are so needed throughout our country. And if you look, the woman right behind her, that's our CEO, Nay Hopkins, who you'll hear me talk about pretty often because I absolutely adore her. So if you want to find out or get more involved, of course, Dylan and I have our cards in the back. But you can also find us online at gunresponsibility.org, all of our social media. You can volunteer with us, testify in Olympia. The 2020 session is going to be coming up. It's a short session, only 60 days, so it's going to be a crazy whirlwind, and we're going to need as much support as possible. I'll probably be reaching out to the Fidalgo Dems to help us contact legislators about specific policies when we need your help of calling or emailing legislators and even potentially activating other community members. But I should also say, so since I am the chapter team advocacy coordinator, I normally just say advocacy coordinator because my title's way too long. I deal with all the volunteer recruitment and management, essentially the grassroots activism. So if you want to get in contact with the Alliance, I'm going to be your best person to talk with, and I would welcome you to email me or text me whenever you would like. That's about it. And I think we'll have questions
At the end.
at the end. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to switch it over to Dylan, and I'm going to pass around our 2020 agenda.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Is this loud enough? Can everybody hear me? I'll just reintroduce myself. My name is Dylan. I'm the Policy and Coalition Coordinator with the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. Thanks, Logan, for going through the ABCs of what the Alliance does. Just to differentiate my role and Logan's role, like Logan said, Logan is in charge of all things field these days with the Alliance. What that means is direct volunteer coordination, event planning in Olympia, direct lobby days, testimony days, things like that. If you want to volunteer in your area or down in Olympia or wherever on gun violence prevention, Logan is your person. As Policy and Coalition Coordinator, I am the point person for contact through our entire network of national gun violence prevention leading organizations. as well as the point person for external policy development communication. So I work with the unit, I work with a lot of our stakeholders to develop our policy agenda in coordination with our policy director, as well as putting the language together and getting that message out to folks like you and the national partners. So again, we'll have some clarifying questions coming up pretty soon. Logan just went around with our 2020 agenda. Can I get one? Yeah. So what thank you. What you have in front of you is the Alliance's proposed 2020 agenda. Everything on this piece of paper is going to be a bill that we are going to be trying to pass this year. It looks pretty long. This is part of our strategy. We come in swinging every year. And the stuff that doesn't pass will come back next year. Everything on this piece of paper we have identified with a series of consultants and lobbyists to identify a path forward. Nothing is on here superfluously. Not everything is intended to pass this year, but it is supposed to start a conversation, and what we don't pass this year will pass next year. And if it doesn't pass that year, we'll go again and again and again until we get this stuff passed. So I can go down this list and kind of discuss priorities, what you're looking at, what the bills are going to look like, and then as soon as I'm done, why don't we have a more general conversation about whether it's materials, whether it's about the role of the Alliance in Washington State, or if it's about this piece of paper in general. Sound good?
And Margie's going to speak.
Margie's going to speak as well. When do we want to do that? You want to go immediately after I'm done?
Yeah, I guess so.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks, Margie. Appreciate that. At the top of our list here is the most exciting bill that we're going to be pushing this session. I will say it's going to be our #1 priority, is a restriction on high-capacity magazines in Washington State. Yeah, especially in light of Dayton and El Paso. It is really bad policy to allow a 100-round magazine anywhere in the state. Really bad policy. So we want to start a cap at 10 rounds, knowing that that conversation is going to change based on industry standards. For example, a lot of handguns, like a Glock or a standard issue pistol for a police officer is 13 rounds, depending on the police office that we're talking about. I imagine that those conversations are going to be contentious, but we see them as productive. And we started at 10 rounds last year. The conversation became, why not 15, then why not 20, then 25. Everything lost water and it failed. It's not going to fail this year. We're going to get it done. So we'll be having conversations about that. When we bring you guys down to Olympia, or when we ask you guys to call your legislators, it will probably be about that bill at the top of your list. That'll be your first line in every email, every letter, and every phone call that you put on our behalf. There's another part to that bill that I'm not sure if it's listed on this piece of paper, but you can expect it coming up. We're still putting the wheels on this cart. We would also like to see a bill that requires a background check on any and all ammunition sales in Washington State. So, oh, it is there, great. It's the last sentence. It's the last sentence. Right now, that's folded into the high capacity magazine bill. As of today, I think it's going to be 2, so we're going to have to add a line item on this piece of paper just to differentiate. Currently, you have to undergo a state and federal background check to buy a handgun in Washington State, and that should be the same for ammunition sales. This comes from a piece of data, and I will say, just generally, there is no policy that we develop or push that does not have a corresponding partner organization or data point or public health lens to it. We don't do anything without data, period. It doesn't hold water, it doesn't work. Putting a background check on any and all ammunition sales is just good policy. 80% of all the gun violence in King County is perpetrated by folks who are already prohibited purchasers. So they have these firearms and they're able to buy ammunition anyway. So it's just a really great way to interrupt gun violence at its source. We're really excited about that one. That's going to be a heck of a fight. Again, we're going to come out swinging. We're going to have a lot of opposition on that one, folks. Raise your hand if you've come to Olympia with us before. A couple folks. Great, that's fantastic. So you folks know that the NRA shows up in spades on our big hearing day, and the Second Amendment Foundation and folks like that. They are going to come out in force this year, particularly galvanized by Tim Hyman's initiative, surprisingly. A lot of the data we're seeing shows that engagement is up on that side of the spectrum. Yeah, so moving right along on our agenda here, second item there is addressing the intersection of alcohol and firearms violence. Again, another really hard, contentious conversation to have. New studies out of California and a couple other states show that the correlation between alcohol abuse and DUIs correlates stronger with, or more strongly with, future gun violence than does a domestic violence charge, which was a surprise to us as well, but this is one of the reasons we utilize public health professionals to tell us what the data trends really are. Currently in Washington State, your fourth DUI is a felony. Do I have that right? Yep. Came down from 5 to 4. Once you're a felon, that makes you a prohibited purchaser. So to lose your right to buy a firearm in Washington State, you have to have 4 DUIs in a 10-year period, 9-year period. Right. So we would like that to be, we're going to have a conversation, it's a conversation bill, seeing about what the limit on that is. So right now we have it at 2 DUIs. May not make you a felon, but it should make you a prohibited purchaser. The data just says that's a good idea. That's going to be tricky. That's typically our legislature, you can draw a line almost right down the middle on who's going to vote yes on our bills and who's going to vote no on our bills with some wiggle room. That one, it's mixed all the way around. So we are definitely going to need your folks' help on that. In particular, drawing folks from the middle to a pro opinion on that. Next one down is keeping kids safe. Currently, firearms are prohibited in K-12 schools, but we would like that to be true also in early learning centers, parks, and libraries in Washington State. This got really close last year, and the death knell of that bill was an unexpected entrance from the Librarians Association against it, saying that they feel they are a targeted population and they want to carry their firearms at work when they're working at a library, which we did not anticipate. So we learn every year about communities that we need to be talking to in developing these policies. So I imagine that there's going to be exempting language this year in that bill to make sure that it gets passed, and I will keep you all up to date on that as that comes along. Next one down, restoring local authority. This is the 5th year, I think, this has been proposed by the Alliance. Currently, Washington State operates under a preemption statute in our Constitution surrounding firearms. So that means that we have a really tough limit on what policies a city or a county can pass relating to firearms. So about as far as you can go right now is a tax on firearms and ammunition. Beyond that, if you want to address firearms laws, you have to do so at the state level. So we want to empower communities like Edmonds, Washington, or Anacortes, Washington, Seattle, Walla Walla, Spokane, to decide what gun violence policies work for them, their law enforcement, and have the discretion to pass those policies. Again, it's just a great idea. The data says the more discretion folks have, the safer our communities become. That has been a really tough fight for a long time, and I can get into details about that. That's a very long conversation and has a long history about it. But it's essentially just changing one RCW, really. It's not a huge fix. Going one more down, centralizing our background check system. Currently in Washington State, I think the number is there are 261 individual law enforcement entities that can run a background check. They don't talk to each other. They don't share data. Right? So things fall through the net all the time. New York Times just ran a story today or last week, where they have seen over almost a 10-year period more than 1 million background checks, or since 2014, more than 1 million background checks have not been completed because of the 3-day mandatory timeline they have to complete their background check. So what that means is if somebody tries to buy a firearm or is buying a firearm, they undergo a background check. If the results of that background check are not done within 3 days, under state and federal law, the federal firearms license dealer has to sell that firearm regardless of background check status. So we need to empower our law enforcement to make sure our background checks get done correctly. A great way to start doing that is to have one central point of authority so these background checks can operate through one mechanism rather than 261 individual. Last year, 2019, we passed a feasibility study bill that went around the state, collected data, and came back with a number, a fiscal note on how much it would cost to set up, a per annum, per year cost to maintain that system, and identify which law enforcement agency in Washington state should be the bearer of that responsibility and should be the center of our background check system. The Washington State Patrol has been identified as the place where that should exist. And if I have the numbers correctly, it's a $3 million setup, $3.5 million setup to get the system going, and then about $10 million a year, $10.5 million a year, and this is what's in the bill, about $10.5 million a year to implement that system, which can be completely offset to the taxpayer, meaning you pay nothing extra if that cost is forwarded to the people who are buying firearms. So you pay for your own background check. It's about $17. It's not that bad. So we're really hopeful for that. That's a huge deal, and I think that's going to go through pretty quick, but I've been surprised before. So we'll see what happens. Can I see my water level? Yeah. Thanks. Right. I drank too much coffee.
Dylan, does Oregon have that centralized bill?
They have a, somewhere in between where we're at and where we want to go. Their legislature is a lot less friendly to the gun violence prevention movement than ours is. So, and I mean, that's changed in the last 300, 400 days, right? So I don't have exact details, but from the work that I've done and the work that we're talking about doing in some other places and working with organizations in other states, they have a really unique system for background checks. So I can get you more details on that stuff. Next one down. I know it's a lot. It's a lot. Most organizations go in with one or two things. We've got 12 on here, 13 on here. Last year was 17. And we passed 10. And it was actually 12 and 2 budget items. Keeping confiscated crime guns off the street. Check this one out. Washington State Patrol asks every year. They request this bill every single year, and it does not pass. They would like the discretion and power to destroy confiscated firearms that they seize from crimes. Currently, they cannot do that. So they store firearms in warehouses, a warehouse, a couple warehouses, and if they want to free up space so they can collect more firearms, they are required to auction or sell those firearms. Now, Washington State Patrol are really smart folks. They know what they're doing. They're great partners of ours. They don't want to do that. They don't want to externalize the problem of gun violence and risk to other communities, whether that be in our state or anywhere else in the country, so they just hold on to them, begging the legislature to allow them to destroy them. It has not passed. We're going to do it this year. The language on that bill has not changed, ever. It shouldn't change. And, you know, the doors for this stuff are opening. The legislature is getting more and more friendly to this. Elected representatives are seeing, literally through the results of elections, that being good on gun violence prevention and working with us on these bills keeps you in office. And when you don't, you lose, and we will get you out. So, we're really hopeful for that one. And if that doesn't pass this year, it will be back in 2021. Next one down, requiring safety training for CPL licenses. 27 states currently and the District of Columbia require at least a rudimentary safety training course to complete and receive your concealed pistol license. We do not do that in Washington State. And there's a lot of problems with our CPL process and the way law enforcement interacts with that. The number one thing that data says can immediately start decreasing gun violence in the home and accidental death is a rudimentary course on safe storage and proper gun handling in the home, period. The cost is very cheap. It is forwarded to the person. The people who give the training course are law enforcement and NRA certified firearms instructors. The NRA does not fight us on this. They like this bill because it's good for their industry. It's just good policy. Doesn't matter who's in on it and who's not. The rhetoric we see against it, time and time again, even from friendly Republicans, is we don't want to punish law-abiding gun owners for doing the right thing, and you're just adding another hoop to jump through. We are going to see that again, and hopefully the numbers check out this time. A lot of these folks that I'm thinking of who fight us on this issue are immovable on this, which is why we have a PAC, so that we can get in on the election stuff. So that'll be back as many times as necessary. That was around last year, and it didn't. Did that get to the floor, Logan? Do you remember? Didn't even get to the floor. I think because Frank wouldn't. We'll see. Different Speaker of the House this year, folks. It's gonna be good. Next one down: community and victim protection. This is kind of a long description, but I think the best way to describe this is there are, as you can imagine, an entire array of different systems surrounding the implementation of firearms and enabling law enforcement to interact with those systems. Whether it's sharing data, whether it's clarifying processes, everything. It's a cleanup bill, right? So we want to allow different law enforcement agencies to share data, what they've learned on implementing these laws, allowing different folks to access important databases, aligning the penalties for different violations, and clarifying procedures for firearms rights restoration. A big part of what the Alliance does, especially in any laws that we pass that temporarily remove firearms from folks' possession, there needs to be a mechanism for which folks can get their firearms rights restored. If we're not doing that, then not only are we going to have trouble getting these things passed, but we're not offering opportunity for reform. So I can go into more detail about that if we have questions, but essentially it's a cleanup bill, making sure everybody across the state is utilizing the laws in the same way. Next one down, I'm really excited about this one, supporting community-based programs. So we at the Alliance have started to learn through the example of other major cities and states like Oakland, California, and New York, that having a top-down law enforcement implemented gun violence prevention system. So we're a policy organization, and we'd like to figure out where we can interact with this, is we have heard from marginalized communities. Again, this is data-driven and from their perspective, and we want to honor these things. The laws that we've passed have not adequately targeted interpersonal gun violence in marginalized communities. What we're hearing is the wrong way to go about preventing gun violence in my community is to have a police officer knock on my door. So we've learned from other places that have made this work that the best way to reduce gun violence in these communities is upstream felony diversion programs, community intervention programs, and violence interruption programs. So I'm from Oakland, California, and in the last 6 years, gun violence has been reduced there by 50%. 50%. Not by law enforcement, by community-based intervention programs with money. They need money, they need staff, they need training. They know how to do this work, and we need to empower them to do so. This is right now looking like a feasibility study to identify the best ways in which to empower those programs across the state. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to go pretty quick here because I know Marty needs to get up to the microphone. I'm sorry. Currently, it is not required for anybody to report a lost or stolen firearm. There are incentives to do so, and some law enforcement discretion, but there needs to be a law that says if you are aware that your firearm has been lost or stolen, you need to tell that to law enforcement within a 48-hour period. And a great part about this is, one, it empowers law enforcement to know what's going on in the street, to look out for these firearms, and also it's an incentive on safe storage. You've got to know where your firearm is and to adequately report it in a 48-hour period, right? So I can answer questions about that as we go forward. Currently, law enforcement agencies are under no obligation to trace any of the crime guns that they seize. So if a police officer gets a hold of a firearm that was used in a crime, they are not under any obligation to try to find out where that firearm came from. That needs to change. Across the state, law enforcement agencies should have a process by which, when they seize a firearm, we have to try to find out where it came from. That'll help us gather data and pass good policy. Updating laws to ensure violent individuals are prohibited from purchasing firearms. So this is a fix. So in our extreme risk protection order process, ERPOs, that Logan was talking about earlier, there's a whole host of things that can make somebody a prohibited purchaser. There's a whole host of things that can make somebody a viable individual to be served in ERPO. And right now, intimidating somebody with a firearm in a public place is not one of them. And firing your gun into the air randomly is not one of them. You can get arrested, you can get charged, but you will still be a viable purchaser of a firearm. So we just need to patch that. We need to fix it. There's a lot of bipartisan support for that. So that's essentially the agenda. I'm happy to go into detail about a whole lot of things and answer all these questions. But Margaret, I really want to get you up here. Yeah, sure. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dylan and Logan. Bring that down a little. There you go. So I'm Margie Lavelle. I live in Edison. We've worked with these guys for a few years, and they're awesome. I'll tell you just how our group is called Safe and Sane Skagit. And we started one day about a little over 4 years ago, to the best of our memories. We were all trying to remember before the meeting here. I was on a family drive. I went on a long drive down to California for a family wedding. And it was in September, I think, of 2015, but it may have been 2014. Anyways, beautiful family time, beautiful drive. And I was stopping by friends of mine that lived in Gerhardt, Oregon for the last night before I drove back up the final leg of the journey. And as I came up and I was pulling into Edison, actually when I left my friend's house, I turned the radio on, and the Roseburg shooting had just happened at Umpqua Community College. And I had just driven through that town the night before and looked at the campus and thought, wow, what a sweet little town, what a sweet little college. And then I went to my friends and stayed overnight. And then, so I listened to the news, I think all the time, the whole drive up. I kept listening to the news, and then I was like, don't listen to this, you gotta turn it off, listen to some music. But it was moment by moment, one of those things where they're saying, no, this many have been killed, this, it was like changing constantly. So when I got home, it was before dark, and I pulled off of Chuckanut into Edison, and there's a gun shop on the corner there. And they had not only increased all their signage when I was gone, but they had also started to paint a huge mural on the side of their building with AK-47 or AK-15s or whatever they are, MR-15s crossed over like this. And this just really hit me to the core. I was like, wow, this is going on, and this is in my backyard. And the next morning I sent out an email to about, 10 or 12 people and said, we gotta do something. I'm gonna show up there at noon with some signs. Anybody else wanna show up? I said, there's a little strip of public property there. We're legally, I looked up what the street laws were, what our rights were, and we could at least stand out front and hold up signs, just talking about what we would like to see is better regulations, better gun regulations. And 10 people showed up, 12 people showed up. And so we did that for, 6 months. We would go there on a Saturday and get yelled at and screamed at by people driving by. And we would stay there for an hour. and then we would walk back to our houses. And none of us wanted to stop, but we knew this wasn't the solution. And so we started having meetings and decided to look for an umbrella group to look to for as kind of like a, to give us guidance, and so that we could jump in and help where we could. So at that time we started researching groups like Ceasefire, Every Town, Moms Demand Action, and when we came upon the Alliance, it was then called, I think, the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility. They dropped the Washington part, but we all agreed that that sounded like right along the lines of what we were looking for, and so we decided to connect with them and let them use us in any way they could, as foot soldiers, going out and getting petitions signed or making phone calls, lobbying. We've gone down to lobby quite a few times. So we started out with about 10 people, and right now we have a membership of about 250 in Skagit County, and this is in 4 years. When you become a member of our group, it just means that you get like a newsletter once a month, and it tells you what's going on in our group. And then if you feel like you could possibly volunteer for something, when we need volunteers, we're always happy to have you volunteer. But it's mostly right now an informative group. We've written a mission statement, and that also includes, for us, we've got a few things beyond what the Alliance is working on. We also try to make an impact in the community by we table like at the Tulip Festival and at the, what's it called, the Shipwreck Festival. We always have a table. And so we have had a lot of one-on-one conversations with people who don't agree with us. And, it's changed. It's changed in the last few years, where people have softened a little bit on us. Because we're not saying get rid of the Second Amendment, we're not saying, it's not that extreme, but they've trained us really well on talking points. So the other thing that we like to work on right now, that we're aiming to work on, is how to approach schools, what's the back door, what's the secret solution to get more information to the kids about warning signs of people that might be, some states have like a hotline, somebody to call if you know of somebody who's suicidal, or if you know of somebody who's stockpiling guns, like I think Pennsylvania. Didn't the Attorney General just put in they have a hotline now for the whole state, and they're getting thousands of calls all the time, and it's mostly addressed towards high school and middle school kids. So we're working on things like that, or do we go to the PTA meetings, or what do we do? Because kids are learning how to hide in a closet and lock the door when the event happens. But what about the preparation steps before, the preventative measures that can be taken, and maybe might even give them a sense of empowering themselves or somehow feeling slightly safer because of that? So that's something that we're just working on in the future a little bit, but our main focus is really working with the Alliance, and these guys are incredible. So that's what we're here for. So I have, what do I have? Oh, I have these sign-up sheets. We're not a group that sends out a lot of emails. We maybe have a newsletter once a month, but when things heat up and we're out there getting signatures for them, or we're going to go down to Olympia, then we might send more emails, like 2 or 3 in a month. So we also operate on almost no money. So we're not out there looking for funds. So if you're interested, sign up, read our email newsletter, and we'd love to have more people with us on this journey. I'm kind of blown away at the progress. And I'll tell you what, I was so depressed that night when I went to bed, after I got home and I saw that sign. Oh, and by the way, they painted over those AK-47s. But it's hard and it's depressing, but when you're doing something, it makes a huge difference, yeah. So, that's all I can. I'll pass this sheet around. Oops.
I'll start the question period. Okay, I've left, and Dorian's going to pass the hat. Usually I say that at the beginning, but we had to start without my usual preliminaries because we'll have questions, so let me set the ground rules. The first one who raises their hand will be first, naturally. Try not to ask 3 or 4 all at once, just one, and then we'll come back to you. Use the microphone, yeah, that's a lesson we try to teach and then I'm not following it.
Yeah.
And Wim is going to run, are you?
I'm ready with the microphone, but I
Okay.
also have a first question.
Wim will bring the microphone to you, and please stand and say your name so we can get to know you and get to know each other. And say who it's for, who your question or comment is for, or maybe it's for all of them.
So my name is Wim Hoepermans. I have a question for Dylan. I do think that gun violence...
Wim,
Yeah?
the lady in the red shirt is first.
No, I was here.
He's got the microphone.
So, gun violence, guns cost the community a lot of money, and we are paying for it with our hospitals, you know what. So, what's happening on taxing guns and taxing bullets?
Great question. Currently, as I mentioned before, we have no state law on taxing firearms. It's just sales tax. But what we're seeing is a wave of citywide and countywide ordinances, most of which are copycats of the Seattle ammo tax. So currently in Seattle, there is a $25 tax on any firearm purchased, as well as, I want to say, 2 cents on every caliber bullet under 22 caliber, and then 5 cents on every bullet above that. Cities are frustrated. They're looking for funds. They're not seeing statewide laws passing that, attack gun violence from this particular angle. A lot of the laws being passed, Tacoma just passed one 3 weeks ago that mandates that the funds raised from the tax get redirected into community intervention programs. So it's being done at the county and city level right now, and hopefully that'll transcend into the state level pretty soon. Great question.
Okay, the lady in the red. Please say your name and wait for the mic. Thank you.
Chris Wardenberg Skinner, and I'm a member of Safe and St. Skagit. And as Margie said, one of our main areas of emphasis is going to the school boards and locally and finding out what is in place other than drills. Is there a prevention program? Is there counseling? Are there discussion groups? And we wanted to know if the Alliance has something in place that as we go before the school board, we can take this as an example of use. So that's my question.
Wait, can everybody hear her? Or should you repeat the question?
I can repeat the question.
Yeah, repeat.
Question is a widely shared concern that we hear from all over the place, and Logan and I are really personally concerned with this as well, about PTAs. What are the gun violence prevention steps we can take in schools? And I wish I had more news for you, but it looks like there's just now getting to be state level attention on really getting stuff done. I'll let Logan take part of this question, but from a policy perspective, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility does not support arming campus resource officers or school security officials. adding guns to the problem is not the way to go. And what we've seen from schools that have implemented these policies, students from minority populations tend to bear the brunt of the enforcement of their firearm capability. I just had a great conversation and policy meeting with the Washington State PTA leads on their legislative agenda around gun violence prevention. So there are some things there, and I'm sure Logan will say this as well, but we hear all the time from kids that they are not being informed very well when an incident does happen. They're just kind of left without information, and that's really, really stressful. So, Logan, you want to?
Yeah, hi. So that is a lot of a question that we continue to receive is what are we doing in regards to schools and our students? And this is a concern that is shared not just with SAS, but also among our other chapter teams. And Julia, a bit of a sneak preview on our call on December 19th, we're going to be talking a lot about what to be doing with school boards. But for example, one of our chapter teams down in Thurston County recently in this past year worked with the Olympia School Board to get a flyer sent home, or actually it's sent through email right now at the beginning of every school year. It's a flyer made by Seattle Children's Hospital that talks about why safe storage, secure storage of a firearm is so crucial. And we've also heard from teachers that they don't know how to talk with their students when their students start questioning why are active shooter drills necessary? Is firearm reform really a way to solve this issue? Am I safe at school? A lot of times we hear from students that they don't want to go to school. They feel as though they are unsafe and they're being targeted. And so we are continually talking with students, primarily middle school and high school students, that school is still the safest place for them to be. Studies and data shows school is still safer than their home, being out on the streets, or even going to a Starbucks. So if there are kids in your lives who are worried about school, please reassure them that it is still the safest place to be.
And just wanted to add one more thing on top of that. There are programs that are starting to learn.
This person here, could you stand please and wait for the mic? He'll bring you the mic.
Oh, thank you. Tom Skinner, Chris's husband, and
Hold it really close.
member of staff, or SAS.
Yeah.
On the education part, I mean, long-term prevention of gun violence would be to educate children at a young age. Now, you passed a law that is really important, and we found that the school district was not willing to let us put a flyer in or make a random comment. Even a random comment is difficult. So, both of us are teachers, and we know that curriculums are developed by professional educators, and they take a lot of work and they take money to do that. But when you have a curriculum that's developed, school boards are much more acceptable to use your packet or toolkit or whatever you would like. And so I would encourage the Alliance to use their resources, and even if it's money, and try to find a professional education volunteer or group or who could develop the curriculum that starts, at probably 6 and 7 year old on up. I mean, you passed this great law that the ERPO and just letting people know how that works and how it's written, people who may not have voted or aren't voters. I mean, education is really more, as important, if not in the long term, more successful than legislation.
Yeah, as Logan mentioned in his piece, we are looking at the mountain of public education on extreme risk protection orders alone, and seeing that passing a law certainly is not the end of the story. I will say that on the school board issue, this year was the first year that the Alliance endorsed and gave money to school board candidates, particularly in Spokane. So Logan and I were out there knocking doors and running a field team out in Spokane, trying to get 3 folks elected to school board. That's the beginning of that process, and we are having curriculum development conversations around that. But like you say, When we talk to individuals, whether they be legislators or voters, about talking to a 6-year-old about gun violence prevention and extreme risk protection orders, we get a lot of pushback, which is why your voice would be so powerful on that issue.
It's just that we have, the district sees us as outsiders. They're not willing to accept our voice unless it comes as a, certified educational package.
Right, okay.
Who's next? Oh, Carol Sullivan.
I'm actually going to talk on that portion just a little bit further. My apologies. I do want to mention that one of our partners, Moms Demand Action, they have developed a program called Be Smart, which is primarily targeted at young kids to give them a better understanding of how dangerous firearms are. And I recently went through this program and saw how effective it is. I can't remember the actual acronym for SMART. Each letter, of course, has a different word, but the entire program is geared towards talking with kids about, if you come across a firearm, how to respond to it, as well as giving parents the education to, if your kid is going on a play date, here are the important questions you need to ask. If your child has a dietary restriction like a nut allergy, you're most likely going to ask that parent, hey, just want to let you know, for lunch or any snacks, make sure that there's no nuts in the food. But how many parents actually ask their playdates parents, is there a firearm in the home? If there is it safely secured? So yeah, and that's what that program really teaches the kids and the parents how to do. So,
Can I just add something? They came and presented it to us at one of our SAS meetings, Be Smart, and so we watched it, and it was presented to us. And I thought it was pretty well done, but I do think, there's a need for a standardized. I mean, we saw it, but then nothing was ever done with it. It didn't go anywhere. But if there were some standardized thing for the whole state, that would be awesome, that everybody's getting this information, no matter, how to keep your guns safe, or how do you not play in a house when you're invited over there, and what do you do? It's great if there's, the standardizing is really important, I think, yeah.
Okay, Carol.
Okay, I'm Carol Sullivan, and I'm also a member of SAS. I'm wondering what has happened after we collected all those signatures, and it took us a month, and then got it passed by the people, but then some of the sheriffs in other counties decided that they would take the law into their own hands. What's happening with that, and what kind of lawsuits has the NRA been directing at 1639? What's the status, please?
Great, I get this question everywhere, every room I walk into. So yes, there was a wave of county sheriffs. I think the number got to 12 or 13. What was it? 13. One of which is running for governor, by the way. That came out and said this is an unconstitutional law, and my county is going to be a sanctuary county for Second Amendment rights, and there is no way I'm going to implement this law. And just like we thought, it was a lot of hot air. We worked with the Attorney General to come up with an appropriate response. He came out with a public statement that essentially said, if we find out that you are not implementing this law and anybody in your county endures gun violence, and that could have been prevented by these laws, you will be personally liable and held accountable. Suddenly, the rhetoric stopped. So thanks again to Attorney General Bob Ferguson for that. He's a great partner of ours. We were just at his, yes, absolutely. We were just at his fundraising luncheon today, and he told us to thank all of you as well for the work that you folks do on this issue. The lawsuit. So, the NRA does this every time. They have spent more money on this initiative than any of our previous initiatives. It's essentially it's like stalled. It doesn't move forward very often because their lawsuit is designed to take as long as possible and be as financially draining as possible, and it is very expensive. Today's Giving Tuesday, by the way. Maureen would be proud of me. So I'll update you as as I can. There is not a status update at this point. It does not look like, just like all the other lawsuits, that they will be able to interrupt implementation of 1639, that they will rule it unconstitutional. It is way off the map, and it's a tact not only to drain our resources and take as long as possible, but add ambiguity into voters' minds about, is this a real thing? What is the status of that? So just to assure you, everything's pretty status quo for the way that they interact with us. Yeah.
So, is it being implemented?
Yes. The full implementation was July 1st, 2019. Yeah.
All right, who's next? Oh, Rosemary.
Rosemary Stevens. I was wondering how many people in this room besides myself have been actually impacted by guns. Mine was suicide by gun. Is there anybody else? See, I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. It's funny, when I go east of the mountains, every hand goes up. Suicide rate.
Impacted by
Yes.
gun violence?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, stand.
Yeah, my name is Charlie Wilson.
Hold really close, Charlie.
Really close.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned, common sense measures to deal with gun violence. And they seem very common sense to me, but there's a whole group of people out there that don't think they're very common sense. And it seems like there's an underlying culture among Americans, many Americans, about guns, gun ownerships. They feel, I would assume, maybe naked without a gun on them. Legislation doesn't quite get at that cultural aspect of gun ownership. And I'm wondering if you have any policies or thoughts about that, or is that just too big of a nut to crack and let it go and work at it from another direction?
Yeah, and I'll go, and then please weigh in on the cultural aspect of firearms ownership as we go forward. I am deeply concerned about the tie-in between being an American and owning a firearm. Like you say, it's an identity mechanism in a lot of communities. Most of the firearm owners that we interact with on a daily basis are wonderful, responsible, understand the language about balancing rights and responsibilities, but there is a very far gone contingency voting base that has been trained over a generation to hear any gun law as this overarching plot to come take your firearms away and disempower you as a people and as Americans. It is very, very hard to reach those folks. It is very rare that they will come over the fence. They're an obstacle, unfortunately, where we would like to make partners. But we have that conversation a lot in the office. How do you disassign firearms ownership from these parts of the culture? And we don't have a great answer for you, unfortunately. Yeah. Population is getting younger, voting base is getting younger. And I will say, while it's still there, the identity portion of firearms ownership is getting weaker as the generations go on. We work with a lot of really brilliant high school kids from March for Our Lives. 10 minutes with any of these kids would restore your faith in humanity. Trust me. Anybody else want to? Yes.
Did you have a question?
Because Gwen was still answering the
Sorry. To answer that, to kind of go further into the idea of changing the culture, I think one of the biggest reasons why that culture is so prevalent is because they're so vocal. And a lot of times people who are afraid of guns or want to make sure that they are regulated when we see that firearm reform, we aren't as vocal a lot of those times because we aren't as invested in it. We don't have something potentially being taken away from us. So in all honesty, it's becoming a little bit more like them, being more vocal about what we want to see, being more vocal about the policies, coming in and showing up in Olympia or even in your local jurisdiction, going and talking with your community or your city council members and saying, hey, what are you guys doing to make sure that our city is safe? Right now our Bellevue chapter team is working to put forth a policy, a resolution, an ordinance in front of the Bellevue City Council to make sure that that city is focusing on gun violence prevention as a main priority, not just environmental stewardship and the homelessness crisis, but the gun violence crisis as well. So we really just need to raise our voice and almost outshout them until they become the minority, if that makes sense.
It's happening.
I think there's also, I think what we've seen too, part of our mission statement, it says to maintain a visible presence in the community. So it's really important for us to be out there where people can say things to us, to our faces, and that we can have a conversation with somebody who thinks completely differently than we do. And that's what happens when we table at these festivals. But that's a big, important part of our group. And so we had, it seems to me that people are screaming at us less in the last couple years. And part of the visible presence also, as far as I'm concerned, is, I didn't bring any signs, but we have signs that we put out there in our streets, street corners, and we sell those when we table. I think people slowly start getting used to this, and sometimes maybe then it's not so scary. It doesn't mean they're going to vote the same as I do, but they might not feel so threatened once they see, oh, these things are around and that's just part of life. But yeah, we have thought about taking, what do they call it? Not like mediation, but de-escalating conversation training, like how to de-escalate this, because we have felt threatened a few times, and we still probably will do that someday, is have somebody come to one of our meetings and teach us a little bit about that. But generally, I'm seeing things are getting a little, the more they see us, the less they're afraid of us, you know? Yeah, I like that.
Anybody else? Oh, yes, back there.
My name is Glenn Street. I'm a Christian first, a U.S. citizen second, and a Democrat. I do have a concealed weapons permit, and the reason I have a handgun is for personal protection. Now that's something that I might strike a little fire in some of the crowd we've got here, but by the same token, when I grew up, we lived in a very rural area. And I still prefer rural areas to city life. City life, you have police protection within about 3 to 10 minutes or less. You can have a police officer at your door to help you with some emergency that you've got. That's not the case out in the country. And that needs to be as well understood. As I agree that we need some gun legislation, I think that the bullying that goes on in schools is a good prerequisite to the fact that there is somebody bringing a gun to school to make it even with that bully. And we only are addressing heavily the one part of controlling the guns, but there's more tentacles to this issue than just strictly gun control.
Yeah, thanks for that point. That's the main reason why the Alliance takes a holistic public health approach to gun violence. Gun accessibility, ease of access is a dangerous thing, but the mechanism by which we tackle gun violence cannot just be focused on firearms. I completely agree.
Anybody else? We have time for one more question. And we close at 9. Maybe we're done. Are we done? Okay, let's...
I would like to give one more brief statement. Yeah. Sorry, I keep taking the mic. So I do just want to wrap up and say that SAS is an amazing chapter team and or partner organization of ours. And if you do feel compelled to just even sign up for their information letter, their newsletter, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't have that much time to volunteer, but if you just want to stay up to date with what's going on within Skagit County, off Fidalgo Island, or even just in the state and what the Alliance is doing as a whole. And as of course, we've got some materials in the back our 2020 policy agenda, a scorecard, a little pamphlet that will give you some more information about who the Alliance is, as well as the ERPO pamphlet, and then there's also, Dylan and I put both of our cards back there. So feel free to grab any of that, and if you ever want to get in contact with us, we welcome all of that.
And I want to introduce Julia Hurd, who writes the Safe and Sane Skagit. Could you stand up so they can see you? She writes the newsletter.
We're also getting ready for the 2020 session. One thing we're going to need is a huge showing of gun violence prevention advocates, folks in this room. The optics by which we outnumber the NRA on hearing days is extremely important, not just to externally facing communication, but also to legislators to see, oh, right, this gets bigger every single year. So you'll come down real early, we'll feed you, we'll give you coffee, we'll dress you in orange. It'll be fantastic. Logan's heading up any and all volunteer recruitment for that. So if that's something you're interested in, he is your point person for that.
What's the day for the gun violence? Yeah, that one.
So
You'll let us know.
I will let you know the second that becomes public.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to be very careful about dissemination of information in a public space. Yeah, just given the issue that we work on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Well, let's thank our speakers.